What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so in this particular video, before I go forward, I want to give a shout out to the brother Eric for once again showing love with a donation to the channel via the Cash App. Salute to you for showing love to Too Raw for TV. So I want to talk about one of the bigger talking points that you hear, one of the main talking points you hear from LeBron fans, as far as, I guess, trying to showcase or to describe LeBron's burden, how he does so much more with less, which is one of the biggest pieces of shit lies we've heard from the media. Talking about how he does more with less. You know, he takes a bunch of bums to the finals. We've been hearing that with those Cleveland teams, and we heard that with the Cleveland teams in the second stint, right? Or any other time in LeBron James's career, even with the Lakers, when AD was out, and LeBron may have had a stretch of playing against sub 500 teams and putting up numbers. They always love to use that same tired trope about how he carries bad teams to the finals, right? Never mind the fact that he was playing initially with guys like Mo Williams, who was an all-star one year, albeit a replacement all-star, averaging 18 points a game for the Cavaliers. Never mind he played with Larry Hughes. Larry Hughes with the Wizards was an all-star back in 2005, averaging 20 points per game, leading the league in steals, but he became magically a bum. Never mind the fact he's played with former all-stars like Shaquille O'Neal, Ben Wallace, Anton Jameson. They magically become bums in the media world. Never mind the fact that he played with one of the most effective early precursor or early prototype, I guess I should say, stretch fours in Donyell Marshall, a fella who once shared the NBA record for most threes in a game with 12. He became a bum. Zydrunas Ilgauskas, who's one of the top 3 or 4 centers in Cavaliers history, he becomes magically a bum in their world. Kyrie Irving, Kevin Love, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, Anthony Davis, even Luka Doncic at times has incurred the wrath of his fan base and been relegated to bumitude whenever they don't win. There's always needs more because LeBron's doing everything, right? So I say all that to say this. Why is it that other players don't get the same credit for dragging a bunch of quote-unquote bums to the finals? Magic Johnson in 1991, quote-unquote, dragged the post-Showtime team that didn't have Kareem, didn't have the leadership of Pat Riley. I believe Mike Dunleavy-Senior was the coach then. It was clearly not the same team. And they upset it at Portland Trailblazers team that won 63 games that year in the Western Conference Finals. Magic took them to the finals. Why does that get added to the resume as far as GOAT discussion for Magic? And speaking of Clyde Drexler, he took some teams, some Portland teams that, were flawed. There was some talent there, but they were flawed. He took them to the finals twice in 90 and 92. Why does that get mentioned with Clyde? What about Charles Barkley? Charles Barkley took a supposed team of, although they had the best record and, the best offense, they were kind of porous defensively. But he took some teams to the finals, or He definitely took teams that were terrible in Philly, terrible, to the playoffs. Terrible. Look at that team that went 53-29 in the 89-90 season. The year that Charles Barkley nearly wrestled the MVP award away from Magic Johnson. Look at that Sixers team. And you tell me if you think LeBron would take that team to 50-something wins. Karl Malone and Gary Payton. Some of those Utah Jazz teams on paper, talent-wise, Antoine Carr, I mean, I don't know, man. Some of them teams, talent-wise, Greg Ostertag, those teams weren't really all that. But somehow they were able to lead those teams to 60 wins. Gary Payton, especially after Shawn Kemp was traded, was able to lead the Sonics deep into the playoffs year in and year out on teams that were not the most loaded. Hell, David Robinson, before Tim Duncan got there, the year that they won 62 games, right, in 95, the year that he won the MVP over King, that team wasn't loaded. You had him, David Robinson, Vinny Del Negro, Avery Johnson, man, who else is on that team? I think Sean Elliott may have been back by then, but that team was not good, man. What about Rick Barry? What about Rick Barry, who led the Golden State Warriors to the NBA Finals and a championship in 1975, when his best teammate was probably a rookie, Jamal Wilkes. And that's about it as far as scoring ability. And they beat a 60-win Warrior squad, a 60-win Bullets team, led by Hall of Famers Wes Unseld and Elvin Hayes. Why doesn't Rick Barry get more credit for that? So my point is, why does LeBron James get so much credit for something that other players have done consistently throughout the NBA? That's what a great player does. Especially, if you might add, if they're doing it in a relatively weak era for the conference or division they play in, like LeBron James did. And then another thing you got to ask yourself, too, is since LeBron fans always want to say that Michael Jordan beat relatively weak teams in the finals, even though that's poppycock, because when you look at each year that they bested the Western Conference best representative, the Lakers won 58 games in 91, the supposed weak team that Magic had. In 92, the Portland Trailblazers, I think, won 61 games. In 93, the Suns won 62 games. In 96, the Suns won 64. In 97, the Jazz won 64. In 98, the Jazz won 62. So how is that weak? But let's just go with that. If those are weak teams that the Bulls were beating, then shouldn't the Golden State Warriors get the same smoke for beating weak LeBron teams? We don't hear that because it's all bullshit. Oh, so when the Spurs beat the Cavs in 2007, does that negate how great the Spurs were? No. Jesse Glassack will say all the time in the comment section, that might have been, I think maybe he does say definitively, 2007 might be the best Spurs team of all time. So this whole talking point about weak teams, it's all bullshit. It's balderdash. It's just LaMedia-inspired bullshit. At the end of the day, LeBron James took some pretty talented Cavaliers teams to the playoffs. He did pretty good, but ultimately, when he faced a team that was able to expose his weaknesses, they lost. That loss in 2007 was on him. I don't care how young he was, because if he had more in his bag per se, those finals could have been more competitive. Uh, Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls were able to beat teams that on paper oftentimes were more talented than they were. Hence the 1998 Indiana Pacers. Why? Because of their championship know-how, their experience, and their savvy. And they were able to overcome the odds quite a few times. So let's dispel this bullshit about he takes teams, the bad teams, to the finals. It's such an old, tired, worn out argument that should be retired. Okay, like him. But anyway, that's all I got to say about it.